So, good morning, dear Chancellor, ex-Prime Ministers, Ministers, Ambassadors, and organizers. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm very happy to be around you in the first Delphi Economic Forum, which has already a great impact, I must confess. So, I don't have many things to say, just to introduce the keynote speakers of the second day of Delphi Economic Forum. The only thing I want to say is that it's very important, being Greece and Europe again in a very critical situation, to share opinions, to share knowledge and experiences. So I would like to call the first keynote speaker of the second day of first Delphi Economic Forum, Dr. Wolfgang Schüssel, the Federal Chancellor of the Republic of Austria.
Thank you, Sia. Welcome to the Delphi Forum. Thank you for inviting me, an Austrian, in times like that. Thank you very much. Honestly, I didn't organize the whole thing to increase a little bit the interest, but anyway, we are where we are, and I'm the chairman of the supervisory board of the Adenauer Stiftung, and thank you very much that we are partners in organizing this conference. And I think it's an interesting time, and let me assume a little bit where we are. What is the context for the migration crisis? The context is an increased number of military conflicts globally. Until now, we have around 400 armed conflicts all over the world, and 60, according to the United Nations, around 60 million officially registered refugees, so unofficially much more, but officially registered 60 million people. And some of the bloodiest conflicts are in our neighborhood. Look to Russia, Ukraine, the Donbass, look to Syria, Iraq with 250, 260,000 killed people, with 13, 14 million displaced persons. Out of them, 4.6 million are outside the country. Look to the terror and religious and civil wars in Afghanistan, in Yemen, in Sudan, Somalia, Sinai, Libya, Mali, North Nigeria, just to name some of them. So this is really a very difficult time, and geopolitics play a significant role, especially in the Middle East, in the Iraq-Syrian conflict. You have the big powers, United States and Russia, fully involved. You have Saudi Arabia against Iran. You have Turkey fighting against the Kurds. You have Daesh and Al-Nusra and a lot of other rebel groups. It's relatively difficult to find partners for a peace negotiation and to establish, for instance, a transition government and what could be a solution after Assad. Until now, Dora Bakoyannis and me, we were present at the Munich Security Conference, and we had a quite interesting debate. Until now, we have around 1,600 different opposition groups in Syria alone. I mean, Greece and Austria, we have also some experiences with opposition groups, but 1,600, this is something. So it's relatively difficult to find partners for a peace. Today, first day of the ceasefire, there is a little bit hope that peace talks could start, but it's still a relatively vague hope. So this is geopolitics, but there are also exogenous factors, external factors, which could influence migration waves. One could be the climate change effects for the next years or decades to come. Demography could and will play a role. Kofi Annan explained us in the Munich Security Conference that Africa alone, the population of Africa alone, will increase from today 1.1 billion people to 4 billion people end of this century. 4 billion people. Imagine what that means if only, let's say, 0.1% of the population has the desire to seek a better life, better opportunities, job opportunities, whatever. So these are exogenous factors. Now, in my second part, I will try to formulate some theses and to discuss it with you. One is the first thesis: 2015 was not the exemption. This wave will not end. This is what I fear. Of course, best case and wishful thinking, this would end. But let's prepare not for wishful thinking. Let's prepare for a more reasonable and more realistic scenario. 2015 compared with 2014 was an increase of 20-fold increase of refugees or migrants coming to Europe. And if you see now January, February this year compared with last year, it's a 10-fold increase. United Nations, UNHCR estimates this year again 1 million refugees if nothing happens, and maybe a little, maybe even more. So the present situation is a test case. Are we willing and are we able to cope with this challenge? It's a real test case. Second thesis: not all member states of the European Union are in the same way affected. Some are number one countries, how to enter the European Union. This is Greece, this is Italy, it could be Malta, was Malta, could be Cyprus. So these are the countries. Spain was it in the 90s, in the beginning of the first decade of this century. These are the countries most affected because they are the entrance countries. Then you have the Balkan countries as a transit route. Today, the most popular transit route for migrants and refugees. And then you have, of course, the destiny countries. This is Germany, this is Austria, this is Sweden, this is eventually Benelux, Netherlands, etc. Other member states are less affected, are not interested, have other priorities. UK, for instance. UK is totally obsessed now with the referendum, Brexit in or out. This is their main top priority. Ireland, for instance, is looking for the consequences of this British referendum, understandably, because they are next to Great Britain. France is obsessed, and rightly so, with the terror threats. You have Spain and Portugal looking how to build a government. Maybe they can learn something from other countries in the European Union. But of course, this is their main priority, and the Baltic states and Poland, they are, of course, always looking with fear and anger and disillusioned views to Russia, what Russia intends to do in the next years to come. So not all member states have the same interest, second thesis. The third thesis is there are clear limits in capacities, but also in the ability and the political will to accept migrants and refugees. For instance, we Austrians, we are 9 million people, and we had last year, like Greece, we had a transit route of maybe 800, 900,000 people crossing Austria, but 10% of them, more than 90,000, stayed in Austria, seeking asylum. During the first weeks of this year, we had again more than 10,000 refugees asking for asylum in Austria. So there are clear limits. If you talk with mayors, if you talk with Landeshauptleute, the governors, prime ministers of the provinces in Austria, we have the same system like in Germany. The capacities are full. We don't have anymore. If you talk, and I have a lot to do in Germany. If you speak with German mayors, with German local ministers, this is over. You can't repeat the same exercise what we had last year. This is impossible. There are clear limits of the patience and tolerance of people is running out. the individual will and ability to assist, to help in a humanitarian way is fading away. And what concerns me is we have today a kind of a blame game. Everybody is pointing fingers to the others, which is strange. It's not helpful. No blame game. We are de facto sitting, we all are sitting in the same boat. And the goal must be the numbers must go down. There is no other alternative. And we have to change this chaotic, anarchic way of waving people through again and return to a legal procedure, which we had. By the way, we had it with the Dublin agreement. We had it. There must be a European legal way to get refugees in and to distinct. This is a very important thing, to differentiate who is a refugee with a real chance to get asylum and who is a migrant just looking for a better life, seeking for better conditions. Fourth thesis. There's now a number of national solutions emerging. This is a kind of an emergency situation because there is no European solution visible. You have Denmark closed to the border, Sweden closed the border to Germany, to Denmark. You have France and Great Britain, the case of Calais, borders closed. Now Belgium introduces border controls to France to block migrants who want to bypass Calais and to choose another opportunity to go to Great Britain. You have Skopje and the Balkans who are seeking national solutions. You have Austria and Germany. By the way, the Germans are controlling the border to Austria. Nobody talks about it, but we have hours of blocks and long queues of cars between Salzburg and Bavaria. This is the reality. The Germans have a contingent per hour how many refugees they accept. So this is the reality. So de facto, we have national solutions today. In my opinion, this can only be interim solutions, because the end of Schengen, and this is the real threat, the end of Schengen would be an enormous cost for everybody. I'm also working in the supervisory board of the Bertelsmann Foundation, and we published, I think 2 or 3 days ago, a study. What does it mean if Schengen ends? End of Schengen means the reintroduction of permanent controls of persons and goods. And the reality is, and the figures are credible, it's a neutral objective study. It would mean cost for the next 10 years to come, again, reintroduction of permanent controls, between 500 billion euro, this is the conservative estimation, and the more pessimistic estimation is around 1.3 trillion euro. And the most affected countries are Germany, Italy, Germany, UK, and France, between, in the more pessimistic estimation, between 230 to 250 billion euro. Italy, for instance, and Spain with around 140, 150 billion. So this is significant. This would cost growth, no doubt about it. It would reduce our ability to have a single market. Because, for instance, just to give you an example, when we are neighbors, Austria and Hungary were neighbors. And our eastern border is Nickelsdorf. I was Minister for Economic Affairs, responsible for highway construction, and I opened the highway to Hungary. In the 90s, we had one lane in each direction, one lane with, let's say, some 100,000 crossings every year. When Hungary entered Schengen, 2006, we had 17 lanes, and 22 million crossing in both directions. So this is the reality. Brenner, for instance, people are talking now on the Brenner. Brenner, 10 million cars per year, 10 million cars per year. And there are also other crossing opportunities, but Brenner, of course, is the main route between north and south. So the end of Schengen would be a terrible solution. It would be a disaster for the European integration. So all these national measures now, these national actions can only be an interim solution. So there is a fifth thesis, there is a need for a European way, for a European solution. And I'm quite optimistic that President Tusk, the President of the European Council, is visiting next week the relevant and the countries concerned, the Balkan route. He will visit Athens, he will visit Vienna to prepare the next very important European summit on the 7th of March. Honestly, this is just, I try to be as neutral as possible, but I'm really surprised why this extra summit did not take place much earlier. This is, we had a lot of summits, extra summits in the case, in the follow-up of the financial crisis. Why not in the refugee crisis, the migration crisis? This is exactly what is needed today, a European solution, sitting together and talk. What are your problems? What are your problems in Greece? What is the problem in Skopje? What is the problem in Serbia? What is in Croatia, in Slovenia, in Austria, in Germany, in Sweden, in Denmark, etc. Really, I do not understand why it didn't take place earlier. What could be the outcome, again, best case, a good outcome, a good follow-up of this European summit? In my opinion, what is really needed is a much better mandate for Frontex. Frontex was, the idea of Frontex was to create an EU agency for external border protection. De facto, the mandate is relatively vague. It means Frontex can only act upon request of a member state. Second, it can only coordinate the activities of member states, so it cannot act alone. So today I've read in some newspapers that Frontex is a failure because they didn't do anything. They have not a clear mandate. They have to wait what the 26 member states agree, unanimously agree. They cannot hire personnel, for instance, alone. They are dependent what member states are sending in personnel, in tools, etc. So what we really need is a much better and extended mandate to create a kind of an effective EU external border control, a kind of an EU coastal guard. If you see the figures, what the American Coastal Guard, for instance, has, they have hundreds of ships. Hundreds of ships. This is a very effective protection, and we need it. And people expect, the European people expect that the European institutions have such an external coastal guard. This requires personnel, this requires instruments, drones, ships, and of course financial means. The budget of Frontex today is 300 million. I mean, if you want to have an effective tool, 300 million is nothing. And if you look at what, for instance, the budget of similar agencies is, I mean, this is, it must be improved. Second, I think the NATO involvement is a good point, in my opinion, because Turkey is a member of NATO, and we hope that this could be an effective, a much more effective way to involve Turkey in this field. Then the next point, what should be agreed next week is we have to decrease the pull factor, and we have to increase the humanitarian assistance for all United Nations efforts. I mean, if you look to the UN budget, UN food program, for instance, ridiculous. The EU member states, by the way, decreased last year. It was one of the effects why a lot of refugees started to walk and to cross the Aegean to go to Europe, because the food program was halved, de facto cut by half. Ridiculous. We have to support the UN camps in Lebanon, in Jordan. Jordan, by the way, is really affected. We had King Abdullah last week, so 2 weeks ago in Munich, and he was really complaining because one refugee per one resident. This is the reality in Jordan. and nobody helps them. So, nobody, but not enough assistance. Also Turkey needs assistance in the UN camps, etc. So there is a need, and also, of course, the entrance countries, Greece and Italy, deserves European help. Then, of course, what we need is a tough negotiation, a real tough negotiation with third countries, Turkey, for instance. Maybe I'm too skeptical, but nobody can explain to me why it was possible that hundreds of ships by human traffickers could leave the Turkish coast without the knowledge and without silent or open support of authorities. This is not possible, in my opinion. Maybe I'm too skeptical, but I'm not naive. So we need tough negotiations with Turkey and other third countries, with Egypt, with Morocco, with the Maghreb countries, Afghanistan, Pakistan. It is unacceptable that they don't take back their migrants if they have no right to seek asylum in our countries. It's impossible. All of these countries are getting a lot of support, a lot of financial support, investment and direct financial support, and we should link what we are doing, what we are helping them with the desire and the necessity to have a full repatriation program for migrants. By the way, there are some existing treaties. Greece, Turkey, for instance, has such treaties. Spain was a very good example with West Africa. They could deliver. Spain had hundreds of thousands of migrants, illegal migrants, crossing the ocean and coming to Spain, but they were able to negotiate with the West African countries, Morocco and Senegal, Gambia, etc., to close the border and to have a legal procedure to get the refugees in. And of course, part of such a deal must be a coalition of the willing. I'm always skeptical by, so to say, enforced solutions. I'm not a friend of qualified majority voting and you have to do this and that, but a coalition of the willing is possible. We, for instance, we are able to accept refugees this year, around between 30 and 40,000 refugees. This is possible. Germany, I'm sure, is able and willing to accept between 200 and 300,000. France, not as many as they should, but anyway, I'm sure that Serbia, for instance, announced they will accept some refugees. The Scandinavian countries will not close completely. But it's not only a European problem, to be honest. This is not only a European problem. Until now, America, for instance, accepted 2,000 Syrians. I mean, America, 2,000? The Gulf states, nothing, not a single one. And other Arab countries, they are their brothers and sisters. So it cannot be a purely and solely European problem which must be solved from our side and from our population. Last point, I think what is needed is also a better communication. Again, we made a study what people think. And people are absolutely in favor of a European solution. Again, a study made by Opinion I think the last 2 weeks in 28 member states. So this is not only in Germany or somewhere else. This is really a broad opinion in all member states. And the result is 79% of the European citizens believe that the European Union should have a common European policy on migration. 52% believe that the EU should be primarily responsible for this issue. 79% of Europeans consider the freedom of movement to be of great importance and believe it should be defended at all costs. 86% believe that the EU has a common duty to protect its external borders, and 79% of European interviewees believe that asylum seekers should be distributed fairly among member states. And 69% believe that the EU financial support should be reduced if member states refuse to accept their fair share of refugees. This is a point which I see as the last resort. In the moment, I would prefer a coalition of the willing, and I would support that this 7th of March summit should create 4-5 points, not more, but these points must be agreed. Thank you very much. I hope I gave you some food for thoughts.